we'll get on to then we get on to the actual race. So to describe the race and how it works, you start off with a formation lap. That's just warming the tyres. So when you see them weaving and stuff, they go around. They do one lap very slowly. Then they actually line up on the grid in their positions decided from qualifying.
Why do they warm up their tyres?
Because they have an operating temperature. So everything in F1 has an operating temperature. The brakes, the tyres, they have to be like warm to actually be at peak performance. So they have a certain window they need to be in, which is a certain, like a minimum and a maximum temperature.
So generally speaking, like they warm up their tyres to make them more sticky so they can like stick better to the track in corners. So if the tyres aren't warm, they won't get grip. And so when they go around the corners, they'll just spin instead of the tyres sticking to the ground and going around the corner quickly, essentially.
Back in the
That's
day,
the
they
reason
actually,
for the formation lap, essentially.
there used to be a really good, there used to be an infrared camera, if you remember, on the cars. That looked so nice. It was so cool.
I really like the new camera in the helmet of the driver. It shows how
Yeah.
intense actually driving a car, like a Formula 1 car is.
Yeah, so after the formation lap, they line up on the grids, the 5 red lights come on, they go off, and then you start the race. That's when it starts, and then, as we said before, whoever finishes first finishes. So we'll get on to like pit stops and strategy for like this section. Pit stops make up like a major part of the race. You don't refuel anymore. The cars are fueled from the start with like 100 kilos or something.
Yeah, because of Felipe Massa in like 2008 Singapore.
Yeah. So there are loads of images of. Actually, there's a famous one of Jos Verstappen when his
dragged-
entire car was in flames. But Felipe Massa.
He dragged like the petrol like hose with him, and like it ended up spraying actual like petrol on the car behind him, and it was lit quite quickly. I think it was Kimi Räikkönen behind him was lit quite quickly.
Yeah. So purely for safety, there's no more refueling, which means a pit stop is just 4 tyres taken off, 4 tyres put back on. And this happens in 2 seconds, which it just sums up F1. Like the fact they can just take off 4 tyres and put them back on again under 2 seconds sometimes is insane. Judging from the fact that the tyres are huge, like they weigh a lot, and they're still managing to do that. If I guess continuing with the theme of pit stops, then they make up a lot of the strategy. Do you want to try and explain what an undercut or overcut is?
So the way an F1 car works is you have different sets of tires, and if kind of in a very basic sense, you have the quickest tire that lasts the least, and you have the slowest tire that lasts the longest. And so depending on your strategy, you can either start on the soft, which is the quickest one, but at least like, it wears out very quickly. Mediums, which is kind of the middle, and hard is obviously the longest lasting one, but it's the slowest one. So you can start on either, and depending on that, and depending on how long the race is, and depending on how, say for instance, hot the track is, that will dictate how quickly the tires wear out. So like if for instance, if you're racing at a very hot track, generally speaking, the tires wear out quickly, so you need to stop twice for tires. Other races, you need to only stop once. And so essentially based on which tire you stop on, it dictates like which tire you're gonna go on, when are you gonna stop, and which tires you're gonna put on, and it dictates how actually quick you're gonna get to the end. So you wanna come out of your pit stop at the perfect time. You don't have any traffic, you don't have anyone in front of you, so you can go quicker essentially. You don't want anyone holding you up. And so this is the whole idea of strategy. Essentially you wanna perfect like your tire strategy to get the most out of it, to get like essentially finish the first or like as quickly as possible. What's next?
Yeah, so that's the strategy, and then if we get into the undercut, if we start with undercut.
Okay. So if say for instance, if the leader, say the leader is, he hasn't pitted before, and he's going. So if the second driver stops before him, puts on new tires, comes out, he'll gain an advantage essentially over the front car. And essentially what he'll do is, if the leading driver comes in the next lap, stops, because the second car, he stopped first, he's actually going to have a quicker lap, and so he's going to be able to either cut down the distance between the first and second, or even in some cases overtake him. So that's an undercut. An overcut is where the front car, generally speaking if you're in first, actually runs longer. So he forces the second car to go in, change the tires, come out, but he manages to make the tires last long enough that when he comes in and comes out, he actually still stays ahead. Generally speaking, that's what's an undercut and overcut.
Yeah, So if you imagine it like us running a running track, but you have to like, in the rules, you have to take a quick 20-second break. A pit stop normally lasts 15 to 20 seconds. If you're including the time coming into the pit lane and leaving again, if you have to include that, it's just all about the strategy of how you take that break and when you take it relative to someone else, so you can gain the most time relative to someone else. And then moving on, we've got the rules. We're not going to get into rules and regulations, seeing as they don't get followed. But there are loads of flags. The main ones you'll see are the same ones you'll see on any karting track. So black flag is disqualified. Green is you can go up to racing speed.
White and black.
White is last lap, but they don't really use that.
No,
white and black is so it's black and white with a diagonal line in the middle. That's a warning.
There is the black and white one that indicates the race is over.
The checkered flag,
There is a yellow flag that indicates that you need to slow down in a sector because there's an accident.
Yeah.
Double waved yellows mean that it's worse. And then you've got
slow to like walking speed, I think.
VSC means that there's a virtual safety car, which essentially means all cars go down to, I think, 60% of their speeds.
40, I think.
40% of their speeds. And essentially what happens is to slow them down without deploying a safety car.
Yeah, so they don't bunch up, they don't do... It's just, if you imagine, Martin Brundle, the commentator, always loved to say it's like a Sky Electrics track. So if you imagine a Sky Electrics track and you have two cars 5 meters apart, if they're both going at half throttle, the distance between them doesn't change. So it's to slow everyone down, but it doesn't change anything.
It's to allow the marshals to remove debris essentially off track. And then you've got the safety car. When it's deployed, essentially what happens is the safety car will come out and then it will slow down, and then all the cars have to come up and catch up behind the safety car. And essentially the safety car will dictate the speed they're going at. And this will, like, if it's a big crash, they're going to have the safety car come out to allow the marshals to remove, say, like, if there's a car in the middle of the road, to remove the car, and then remove the debris and stuff. And then the safety car will come in and the race will go. So generally speaking, a VSC or a safety car will come out under, like, yellow flags. Like, when you have yellow flags, they can be, like, deployed. One of them will be deployed, generally speaking. And then the last one will be a red flag, and that means the race will be stopped. So the race will be stopped because there's like a massive crash, there's too much debris to remove.
Too much rain sometimes as well.
Yeah, so like Spa was a Spa this year. So essentially what happens is the race will be stopped, generally speaking, like can be from 15 to like minutes to like an hour. And then the race will resume from where it stops. So if it stops lap 15, it starts lap 15. It can either start from a standing start, so that's like a normal like start of the race.
On the grid from how you were before
or it
the
can
red
start
flag.
behind the safety car. So the safety car comes in, and then whoever's leading at the time, he dictates when the race essentially starts. So he can go slowly, and then at whichever point he feels comfortable, he starts the race by going off, and then everyone can race behind him essentially, and race gets going.
Yeah. So that sums up the race. If there's any questions, we'll be happy to answer
put them in the comments below, and we'll comment on it.
Just quickly, we'll come over like some key terms in this section. In terms of driving, another form of under and over is understeer and oversteer. Understeer is when you're turning the wheel but the car doesn't turn enough. So if you're turning but it just goes in like a straight line, it just slides forwards, then that's understeer. Oversteer is the opposite. If you imagine drifting but purely just by turning the wheel a bit too much, the rear end steps out and then you start drifting. That's oversteer. If people talk about lockups or flat spots, you're braking too hard or braking while turning. The wheel, instead of slowing down gently, if you imagine like a bike, instead of the wheel slowly stopping, it just stops, and that causes the smoke that you see. It causes a flat spot, which is the rubber, the bit of rubber that was rubbing against the track. It becomes flat rather than round, as an exaggeration.
Yeah, generally speaking, when a lockup happens, the tire doesn't go around. So what happens is the brakes will clamp, and then the tire, instead of going around, the tire will just stay fixed. And so what happens is, instead of the tire going around and like new surface area of the tire contacting the track, for the like however long they stop, the same patch is in contact with the ground, so essentially it burns up, so it melts quite a bit. So you have kind of like a weak point on that tire.
It's like
at that flat spot essentially.
Yeah. So the flat spot is the part that you've been dragging across,
Yeah, so that's the weak point, essentially, the flat spot.
And then the last one is box, which you'll hear over the radio, and that just means pit. So when a driver is told to box, you're just told to pit. And then one that we've forgotten to mention before, the teams, they're split into the front runners, which are the fast ones that you see like Red Bull and Mercedes, and then anyone else like behind that is called the midfield. Those are the cars that you'll see in like 10th and 15th.
Everyone, basically everyone besides those fighting for the race.
Yeah, pretty much. So that sums up the race section.